People refer, when it comes to AI, to the human in the loop, right? The human in the loop, yes, but is it enough? Because you're just in the loop. You haven't got necessarily the ownership of that loop. So who dictates the loop? Is it the human or is it the AI?
Well, welcome to Thinking Through, where we sit with the complex, the evolving intersections of education, AI, and human experience. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Lester, and today we're asking a question that is becoming increasingly harder to answer. What is real? As AI systems increasingly mediate what we see and know and trust, it leads me to want to pause and just have a think, just slow it down and ask the questions of how do we recognize what is real? Carla is here today and she's going to help us slow things down and think things through and really hold these tensions. So I'm really grateful for you being here, Carla. Thank you so much.
Hi, Alison. It's wonderful to be here and wonderful to engage in this kind of conversation with you, because it's something that preys on my mind a lot. And the more it preys on my mind, the more questions I have rather than answers. So I'm not sure if anybody's seeking for an answer or multiple answers that they're going to get them. But, at least I think there might be some food for thought here. So can I just start by telling you a little story about why this kind of obsession with real and unreal really kind of started and how it kind of started taking shape over many, many years. Quite a while ago, I was in Paris at the Orangerie, which is the museum where Monet has all the lily paintings by Monet are exhibited in this amazing space. Although I have to say, when I did enter the space, immediately I was hit by a sea of blue light and people with cell phones and video cameras and iPads engaging with these pictures through the lens of their device. Often they're not even seeing the whole painting or the space in which the painting resides, because these canvases are big. And a lot of people also then have their selfie sticks. So they want to take selfies in front of the painting.
Yeah.
There's amazing beauty of space and painting and art. Yeah. And it's kind of getting completely lost. And sort of like, well, what reality are these people in? I want to kind of immerse myself in this space and what's in it and engage with these pictures and being overwhelmed by them. Yet it's this whole thing with all these devices just got in the way of that experience. And you wondered what people were actually seeing or looking at, because they seemed to be more obsessed with the picture they were taking rather than actually what was in front of them. And it made me think of a Belgian painter called Magritte, who was a surrealist. And one of his most famous paintings is, of course, Ceci n'est pas une pipe. So this is not a pipe. And of course, the painting isn't a pipe because it is a painting of a pipe. So you've already got this concept of mediation, by putting it on a canvas. But what I sort of felt was like, this is not a pipe, but this is no longer Monet. That's how I felt about this. This is no longer Monet. This is no longer how we can experience these canvases, how I can even look at a whole canvas without being pushed aside by a selfie stick or blue light or, iPad that gets in the way, and get the sort of whole experience of a canvas and the space, but also then zoom in with my own eyes to kind of look at, what has he done with his brushstroke and why? So you just don't get this. And what I also felt was that this whole experience for so many people was about, I need to take pictures because I need to share them on my social media. It was sort of totally transient and not even like, this is something that I'm, sort of put in my memory, or this is becoming part of my memory bank. I mean, I'm sure they go back to some of these pictures, but it was all very transient and very sort of instant gratification, looking at how many pictures can I take. And I got really irritated by it, because we talk a lot about immersive tech and we need immersive tech. But this was the kind of the most immersive space you could imagine, and, an experience that we could behold, yet there was no beholding.
Yeah, I think about the growing trend of when I go to concerts, and everyone
Exactly.
has their phone and holding out and to record and to document for, I don't know, the competition of posting it on, to have the likes and the shares, or just to record it for their own life. But there have been times where I too have almost, it feels like breaking out of the matrix in some ways of stepping out and just seeing, whoa, we are all having this moment. Like if I think about, a recent concert I've been to, and, we're all having this moment, but I'm looking at a sea of phones,
Yeah,
being held
exactly.
up. And
Exactly.
and it's a really bizarre trance because are we really, it makes me think of presence.
Yes, exactly.
What is presence now? What is
Yeah.
embodied presence?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you because, this is kind of like, are we present in the moment? Are we present in a simulation of a simulation?
Yeah.
Because, we're already kind of looking at it through a lens. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
taking these pictures, which then become another sort of assembly, if you like, of pixels that translate it into, a reality that is no longer real. Yet, of course, we are
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it as real because it's the same can be said of a photograph. The experience also gets worse. I go less and less to exhibitions now because it's the same wherever you go. And you can't actually experience this anymore. You have to sort of be in this morass of digital engagement and activity, which fragments everything that is actually in that space.
And it makes me think of a couple of years ago, I went to up in Indianapolis, they had the Van Gogh, like immersion, the digital
Yes. Yeah.
immersion,
Yeah. Mm-mm.
that you could experience. And for those who don't know, it's you go into a blank room that's been all wired with projection, and so it projects onto the walls, and you see Van Gogh's paintings come into life. They're turned into movies in a way, or moving pictures, and where parts of the paintings will flutter, or whether flowers may blow in the breeze. Everyone had their phone out to capture the selfies when the sunflowers took over the ceiling, the walls, the floor, and you're immersed in this digital sunflower field. And people are documenting, and I too was taking a selfie in the moment, because it's being immersed in this space. But it felt really soulless to me. And I also sometimes feel this way when I'm interacting with or an AI content, is something that I know that's generated by AI content. When I know that image, that artwork, that music, when I find out that it was AI generated or machine mediated, it loses a bit of the connection, that magic to it. And I feel flattened, removed from it.
Yeah.
And I noticed myself instantly. And I had that same kind of experience where I'm in this space, in this museum, this art museum that's just, it feels like it's begging me to enjoy it and be immersed in it and love it. And I just looked around and I just kind of felt like, okay, I'm 5 minutes into it. I'm ready to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I were, and I have been at the Van Gogh Museum and looking at the real painting, and I'm staring at it, like you're saying, and my presence is attuned to it. I'm looking at those very same sunflowers. I'm captured by the brush strokes, and the layered of it, and to be able to see the weight and the thickness of the texture. And more important than that is that I know his hand touched it. I know this is of him. And I also, there's another thought that's coming to me, and then I'm curious about your thinking of. There's another piece of it of, some people could react and say, well, it's a privilege to be able to, fly or travel to be able to see the real painting, and that these kind of mediums and this immersive experiences or things like that are ways to bring people in. But I also feel like they're kind of like flashy entertainment that speaks to the moment and the trend of now.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, and I kind of don't disagree. I think for me, the experience that you describe is one that is kind of fragmenting what is actually the story of a piece of art or a piece of music or an experience of a concert, because we sort of take it into little moments, we cut it up and we make it into a sequence of moments, and preferably moments where we can go, wow. And that's where these, no, but seriously, but that's where these,
with you,
where the Van Gogh experience that you described is so much of you walk into a space like that and you go like, oh my God, wow. But then that wow, how long does that wow really resonate or echo? Because after a while, the wow goes like, oh, I'm kind of used to it now. So it's sort of like, it becomes, normal, and it becomes the normal reality of this. But what it's lacking to do is also lacking to tell you the story that sits behind the painting and in Van Gogh's soul, I think. And whilst I totally get why these immersive experiences exist and they do have a value, I also think we have to ask ourselves some of these questions around, what is the reality of this and what is the reality of that painting that we now see kind of deconstructed and amplified on the ceiling as a set of pixels that have been assembled as a virtual representation of what Van Gogh has painted. And not everyone has the means to go to a museum. I would argue that those immersive experiences are also quite expensive in the first place and not very inclusive.
They're not accessible to begin with. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's sort of like the kind of story and the narration of what happens there, for me, gets kind of lost or gets replaced by something that's different, but not the essence of the reality. I can get very excited by an immersive space, but it lasts maybe 2 seconds or maybe a little bit longer, to be fair. It's sort of like momentarily, it's transient. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't echo. And we've now got this kind of, sort of obsession with immersive technology also in the learning space. We need immersion because otherwise kids won't learn very well. And you kind of go like, but there is immersion everywhere. I don't need to put on my headsets when I go for a walk to listen to music because I'll be missing the birds. And, the birds around here at the moment it's astonishing.
And and I think, now we're in this, this explicit emergence of AI in front of us. But as you speak, I'm thinking about all of the synthetic mediation that we've had before, and especially with, Gen Z, in that space of just increasingly more and more synthetic mediated. I mean, when we go to take a photograph through our phone and we use portrait mode or whatever, that is being mediated through filters,
Yes. Yeah.
There are people that come to mind that would never post an Instagram photo without a filter, on it. And so even what we share with the world, we're going to add a lens of the filter, I think of.
Yeah, totally.
There is there's that piece there, even music being more and more synthetic mediated with technologies. And we've seen that for, decades now. I'm just, I'm a huge, huge fan of 80s synth pop, and I love the new wave, and that, that's those synthetic, drum kits, that's not a real drummer playing. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with these little, each isolated bit, but when we start to add it up, that's where I feel a increasingly discomfort that I haven't fully brought a lot of awareness to, because it's an unfolding living moment. And then, like the moment that happened to you when you're looking at the Monet painting or in a concert, where it just have these pop out moments where I think of so much of our media, of TV, of movies is not what was filmed. There's a post production kind of thing
Yes,
that goes
absolutely.
on, and I think of trying to map out, is there another technological moment that's happened in the past that we can pull forward. But I don't know if there's been that much of distortion of or shifting of reality in this way, of where it's really so much what we come in contact with is being synthetically mediated.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I find interesting in this is also that, if you look at human evolution, and especially since the Industrial Revolution, right, that what humans are achieving is kind of aided or augmented by inorganic, whether it's mechanical engineering tools or electronic engineering. And that sort of, we're constantly engaged like now with an inorganic world. Now, when it was like driving a tractor, that was sort of like made a lot of sense. But more and more, if you look at our evolution, and I sometimes wonder, where is this going to end? Because is the inorganic world going to take over of the organic world? People will talk about artificial intelligence as that pinnacle of that kind of inorganic world. And it may well be, but it's also, and that's what worries me a little bit about the AI thing, is that, we call it intelligence, so immediately we humanize it. Whereas it's sort of like, it should be probably called something else, like computational augmentation or computational reasoning or something like that, where we kind of take that human or that humanization out of that, of the term. Because the biggest worry I've got, and this applies especially to younger kids and younger learners, is that this becomes so ubiquitous and so normal that, and the way these AI, especially in generative AI scenarios, evolve, and the multimodality of these things evolves, that this becomes like their buddy and their friend, becomes something that's completely sort of distorted and has an inorganic dimension that at the same time seems to erode our deeply human social dimension.
Yes.
We surrounded and immersed in social media till the cows come home, yet people have never felt so lonely. So how does that add up? Because we're not really engaging with people we think we are. And when it comes to, the sort of the tweets and things, there is that sort of like, what do you get to see? The algorithm decides what I'm getting to see, not me deciding what I want to see. Like, I was playing something on Apple Music the other day, and I was listening to a piece of music, and then suddenly that piece of music had finished, which was in my library. And then this really stupid piece of music in my book, anyway, came immediately after it that wasn't in my library, that I would never choose to listen to. Yet Apple decided, because you've listened to that, and a lot of people have listened to that piece and then went on to listen to this piece, and you've got the kind of algorithmic prediction behind it and the reinforcement of that prediction. I had no choice, and I had to turn it off. And that's not how I want to experience music. I want to be in control of what I want to listen to. I
just wanted to name that. Just there is this loss of control.
Yeah. And I mean, people refer, when it comes to AI, about to the human in the loop, right? The human in the loop, yes, but is it enough? Because you're just in the loop. You haven't got necessarily the ownership of that loop. So who dictates the loop? Is it the human or is it the AI? It's very interesting how we just kind of, this is becoming normal. I mean, for a lot of people, this is normal. I'm probably a bit older than most people in your audience, for whom, that is just a fact and a given. Well, it kind of isn't for me, because I like to, be in control. I do appreciate when something comes up in the list that I might not have known about, and I can opt to listen to it, but not that it starts playing straight away. And I also quite like going to find out for myself. And we don't seem to do that anymore. And, if you then extrapolate that again to learning and education, Alison, you kind of get into these personalized modes, and There's a lot of room for personalization. So don't get me wrong, but there's also, we need to kind of consider how we look at personalization, because now it goes so far that the image of a personalized learner is a set of data and algorithmic prediction or generation behind it. But we know that there is more to learning than just the kind of interaction you do with the kind of knowledge materials you're getting, even in applied or problem-solving projects that use computers. I mean, learning is messy. People are messy. And we're kind of trying to sort of push this through this funnel of structure. To some extent, we need the structure to kind of make sure we have the right building blocks to learn on, and personalization can definitely play a role. But are we judging a learner because of the data that we've got on that learner that has been obtained by a virtual entity, rather than actually this learner may be incredibly talented in other things that is never represented in that personalized image that we've got of that learner? Now, that really worries me, because that then becomes quite deterministic for that learner. And that's where we need to kind of really look at, what do we do with education in this space, and this kind of mixing of realities and sort of potentially determination by data, and data that we haven't got control over.
There's this language, merging of AI as our thinking partner.
Yes.
And I'll admit, I've said that in my
I
classroom.
did too.
Yeah, think of AI as your co-partner, your thinking partner. And listening to you and kind of surfacing my own questions and reflections on that idea of AI being, a thinking partner. Thinking partners, and it goes off what some of what you said, share the context. They share the care, they share the intent, they share the messiness with you, because they are messy themselves. Because they're human, and they're and we can sit in that messy middle, muddy middle space of really chewing on and thinking and turning and turning and turning it again. And AI cannot. It has none of these. It can simulate that, but it cannot, and it's being to really be your thinking partner. And yet the partnership, metaphor can lull us into feeling like we're engaging with something that understands us. And I think that also folds in, there's this one part of just as a human interacting with the AI and process, and then in the learning space. But then what you were also adding was this other dimension of predictive analytics, or what happens when we are personalizing learning, but we are having an AI that's helping us co-construct a personalized learning environment. What do we inherently lose when we engage in that piece of personalized learning through an AI lens? I wouldn't say, I'm not saying when you're personalizing to the learner needs and you are, as a teacher, thinking really critically about what that student is, and watching and observing their lived experience in the classroom and their life world, and through the observation and the slow looking and the reflection and the practitioner inquiry that a teacher does to really understand, the learner, and then how do you really think intentionally around the design of the learning experience.
Definitely. And I think one of the things is that, when you sort of playing around with ChatGPT or Claude, or very amazing tools, they're incredible tools, but you also have to challenge them. And you have to challenge them a lot. So to your question about, sort of personalization and sort of driven by AI engines, and where this AI influence becomes quite big. For a start, I don't think we should ever let that happen, in terms of, we shouldn't just look at personalization as individual, totally individual. We should also look at that coexistence, or the co-creation between the teacher, the learner, and the machine. So teacher, learner, and machine kind of working in this co-creative environment that is not dictated by the machine. Another thing that I talk about increasingly about now is actually we might have to kind of look at personalization that is socialized. So, and AI can really be quite good at this as well, in terms of how it orchestrates that socialization based on, what learners have done. And this is not a question of, we're going to get all the smart kids to work together all the time. To the contrary, this is also about a different learner profiles, or struggling learners working with less struggling learners. So we know from research that if that happens, both parties do much better.
Yeah.
So it's not just a question of, someone is very smart and they know it all, and so therefore they're going to be held behind by the more struggling learner. No, not at all. They both benefit, because what happens in that context, and if you socialize it, they're actually engaging in a dialogue where one is explaining things to the other is asking questions or trying to tell it back to the first person who's explaining it. And suddenly you have a whole construction of not only learning transfer happening, but also learning construction, clearly. And if AI can kind of help with that orchestration and also help with challenging, because that's, I think, what AI doesn't do enough still. It's like it doesn't challenge, it just responds to your query, and it will regurgitate your query and come up with sometimes a very sophisticated answer, but often very superficial. AI isn't going to go away. It's only going to get bigger, and it's going to get more involved in our world, or we might get more involved in its world, potentially, which may be more likely.
What does that mean that you're saying we might get involved more in its world? What do you mean by that?
Okay. Yeah. So what I mean, it's a very, very good question. What I mean about that is that obviously as AI it's an exponential technology, right? It's no longer an incremental technology. It's totally exponential. We haven't got really much of an idea where it's going. Even the experts disagree on where it's going and how quickly we'll have, super intelligence and all these things, but it is evolving incredibly fast. Our human evolution has been much slower. Our human development, from baby to 18-year-old who goes to university or higher education, or enters the workplace, or gets into a vocational apprenticeship or profession, is much, much slower than this technology is doing. So by that exponential nature, and by the way it's becoming so ubiquitous already, I mean, it's in our phones, like we're not even aware of it. That's what I mean, that it's becoming more kind of our world is going into its world, or its world is kind of getting more and more invasive into our world. And that's kind of what I'm hinting at when I say that. It's like, it's so big. Humanity as a collective is pretty awesome. But we have to react and deal with it as a collective. We can't just deal with AI purely as individuals, which is, of course, what often we are kind of encouraged to do.
I want to go back to, it's a thread that we're pulling, and I want to circle back to it of when everything is mediated. I wonder, as everything becomes mediated, what will we ask ourselves to invite or pull spaces forward? I think about, will gap years look different? Like a student graduating high school, instead of taking a gap year of working in a co-op or an internship or apprenticeship or just taking time to find themselves there, they'll take a tech-free year off. They're going to go and work organic farm or something, or they're going, we're seeing this kind of trend within entertainment of concerts where it's a no phone concert or a no phone comedian, comic show or something like that, where it's trying to tap into the presence of the space. And I wonder, what are we going to do to preserve that unmediated lived experience? Because I think about when so much becomes intervened by AI and supportive and just kind of in our environment, the loss of being able to slow down and really see the world and invite friction and be comfortable with friction and be comfortable with uncertainty happens when you're not always having something taken, done for you or automated.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to predict really how it's going to work out, and I think it will be different for different people. But I certainly think there is something in that, we sort of, we talk about digital detox, don't we? And that kind of stuff. So I can sort of imagine if you've constantly been surrounded by tech, for some people, it will be very hard to even imagine whether they could even do it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so much part of their life and it's so much part of their identity.
And I think of the journey from, I'm an older millennial, so it's, watching the internet come online and then that evolution and shift into it. And then, the generation after me having iPads and they're in the internet and they're more immersed into it. And then now the generation, after that, or eventually it's so ingrained, a AI-mediated world is the normal. Right now, it's not. It's my goodness, look at look at this world and look at this emerging tech, because it's emerging, but soon it won't be considered really emerging. There'll be, new innovations with it, but not really like in a in a radical sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting to just think about a mobile phone here, because a smartphone is full of AI features now. It has been for some time, and it's just getting more and more and more. The way our cameras operate, the way they do classify our pictures, and the way they sort of recognize faces, and all that, and the taxonomies they build around it. So it's pretty much AI driven. So if you're kind of already thinking of that, and you're going on your gap year, but you take your phone with you, you're not without it, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But I do think that there is going to be and maybe it's already here, and it will differ, I think, also probably be a bit generational as well. But there will be a point where, there's sort of like, we need to stop. There's too much noise. There's just too much noise. And that was also, your concert, and then my experience at the museum, where actually the noise wasn't necessarily noise in the sense of sound, but was, a lot of digital noise. It was a huge amount of noise. And I think there come times when noise is just too much. The aftermath of COVID, and especially what they saw in schools, was because of all this stuff, the kids didn't want to go anywhere near it, especially the smaller ones.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to go to school if they had to have tablets, and they wanted to be with their friends, and and I think it's very hard to kind of predict what's going to happen. Some people will not be able to kind of take that detox, if you like, but I do think there will be something that says, hey, this is going too far. If you look at the number of people who now are growing their own vegetables again.
Yeah.
It's or who join a knitting club or something like that. People need to do something with their hands. And people, need to kind of feel they are doing something with their hands, and they are doing that in the company of others. Just that sheer presence of the other, which the machine can never give you. Whether that's, the gap year is going to be the non-tech year, it'd be very interesting to see, because even if these kids want to travel, they'd probably take their phone and their credit cards and to take the pictures and
yeah. But or I think of the Black Mirror episode of contact lenses that have augmented reality.
Exactly.
And I think of one of my favorite, sci-fi young adult books, The Feed, where, you have an implanted digital connection, to this augmented reality world, this overlay, and it becomes increasingly hard to not conform to that space. I have a colleague at ASU who I appreciate and love dearly and has been an incredible mentor to me. And he is not far from my age, and he has a non-smartphone, a dumb phone, just a flip phone that I remember, having when I, was in college, and it and the reason why he has this phone that he shared with me is not because he's involved in the Luddite movement or wanting, to position that, he said, no, I know myself. And I know that when I love to read and I love to learn, and I would be on my phone all the time,
Yeah.
sucked into videos and media and reading constantly, and I need a break.
Yeah.
I need to have some separation in my life. I am noticing with my students and in my personal life and the people that are around me are trying to think intentionally about how they're consuming tech, but it becomes harder and harder and harder when it's your sense of connection, your
Yeah.
news source, your entertainment source.
Yeah, one of my nephews was telling me the other day he went to dinner with his kids, and he's doing it regularly now, so I think once a week. And dinner can be just a bag of chips, right? So it doesn't have to be a big thing. But the condition or the precondition is no devices. We're going out together, no devices. And he said to me, the amount of talking we do is just amazing. And what's even more amazing is that they love it. They absolutely love it. They object to and certainly the first time, they objected to having to leave their devices behind, and no phones and no iPads, and no, they stay at home. And it's like, no, 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 we can't go out. But now they don't even touch or go anywhere near the device when they know it's time for that weekly event, because they love it, and they go to a different place every week and they experience, just sitting around the table and eating a bag of chips or a Mexican meal or whatever. And it's just changed that whole family dynamic in terms of that moment where actually, you know what, we're having a meal together, which is effectively a social event. We're not sitting in front of the television, and we're not sitting in front of our devices, and we're just having a meal together. And the reason why he's going out is if he does it at home, he feels that actually it would be much harder for them not to kind of try and reach out to the device and start being distracted by it. So they go out. And they have a walk. He parks the car somewhere, and then they walk to whatever place they're going to eat at. And they spend an evening together just enjoying, chatting, and telling each other what they've done and what they've been up to, and or what they might have seen on YouTube or, whatever.
Yeah.
But they actually are sharing experiences, which, if they're all scrolling all day long, they're not. They're just, going from one to the next. And
Yeah,
I mean,
sharing reels. I think of a
yeah,
lot of my
yeah,
Instagram messaging is just find a reel and then I share it and we're
right,
just
okay.
sharing back and
Yeah, yeah,
forth
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah, yeah, yeah.
mini, videos. And I think what it circles back to your point of we are we're technologically connected, interconnected, and yet we're the most lonely we've ever been. And this loneliness and this seeking of real connection, human connection, is aching call that we have, within
Yeah.
us, and what you're describing are these moments where you are having a shared lived experience, sharing experiences, and it is doing what, I mean, it's in a way kind of healing the need or speaking to the need of connection, and which that happens when you are present. There's that
Yes,
presence,
exactly.
yeah. And you can have that same presence when you're on Zoom. Us together, we're in this moment, we're attuned to this, moment. We can have that, in online and learning environments, in different ways, in different mediative ways. You can have presence when we're in that tuned space. But it's when you spoke about the noise and the quieting the noise, I heard that as, how do I turn down the noise so then I can turn up my presence, and
It's a
really
beautiful way to put
be in
it,
this moment.
actually. Yeah, yeah. That's beautifully put. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's something we're going to have to relearn.
Yeah. 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 But I'm an optimist about it. And I also am thinking, when you said relearn, my immediate thought was, but how do we relearn when it becomes less and less known?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what is presence when
Yeah,
presence becomes so mediated, synthetically mediated.
absolutely. Yeah.
What does that look like? Do we need to consciously taking our learning of what we are finding out about the impact of social media on young
Yeah.
people and ourselves, in different demographics, and what we're learning of, okay, this tech,
Yeah.
we went into it, okay, all playing with it, and then we pull back. This is disrupting how we connect, or this is a space for misinformation, to come and viral conspiracy theory or whatever, can unfold. We have to step back, and we've done thorough research about social media and the impacts on brain studies or psychological impact and
Yeah.
relational impact and teaching and learning impact, within that space. And this AI not phase, this AI, I
Event?
don't, what is it? What did you say?
Event?
Event? Yeah, AI
Yeah.
event that we're in. Uh, we need deeper research, but tech development doesn't work that way. To
Mm-hmm.
slow
No,
down,
no,
to
yeah,
allow,
absolutely. No.
because it's market driven, it's competition driven, it's not driven on deep human need.
You know what I think is really quite important there, and it's something that education hasn't been very good at, although researchers obviously are. But in terms of the sort of traditional model of education, where it was about you have to kind of demonstrate what you've learned, you have to answer the questions. I think the only way out for us is, and that relearning or learning in many cases, it has to start with the ability to ask a question. Because when you ask a question, you're already kind of take a pause, right?
Yes.
You take a pause to reflect, to ask the question.
Yes.
It's quite ironic, or, well, maybe not ironic, but quite interesting that, if you look at how generative AI works currently and what it relies on is us asking it questions, or the machine asking another machine questions, or giving instructions. But it's really, if we want to get something out of it, we need to ask it a question. So that's quite a bit of a sort of an irony. But I'm convinced that, and this is where education really has such an important part to play and needs to take risks, because we might not have all the research available to kind of take, to be evidence-led in this case, which is not always a good thing anyway.
Yeah,
but, where we kind of also teach and co-create with learners and students, how do we ask questions? Because that's stopping to kind of reflect on what you need to ask, how deep you need to ask the question, and how you might have to reformulate the question. And that in itself, turns on the mental noise. But for me, the kind of art of the question has never been more important than now.
I fully agree. I could not agree more. Is the art of the question. I work a lot with teachers, and I have teachers, grad students who are in-service teachers, some of them veteran teachers. The course that I teach is a year-long practitioner inquiry course.
Nice.
And it is the art of questioning. And I say this in the beginning, and it's I've been doing this now for over a decade, and it's never believed. But I say,
right, okay.
I say that we're going to take the entire year to find our question. And I go, if we've done it right at the end of this year, we are going to leave with more questions than answers. And that's the goal
100%
of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's never believed. I have had a student who has been like, yep, got it. Okay, I'm just going to be comfortable asking questions. No, it doesn't happen. So when we talk about the art of questioning, it can be a long process.
Yes. It's, you go through multiple questions before, and that's the whole point of it. But that's also where we currently still have an advantage over AI.
Yes.
But it's a skill that in education is not been honed, because we're meant to give the answer, not, and our relationship with knowledge has been dictated in terms of, giving the answer and knowing the answer, but actually not knowing the question to ask, only gives you a half-baked answer. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in this kind of new realities that we live in, that is in which we also have to become far more adaptable all the time because of this fast exponential evolution of technology that's, going to be so persuasive in the world, is that, unless we can actually ask the right question, we can't engage with this. And of course, we need the building blocks of knowledge for sure, and have the construction, and the skill set to construct that. But that skill set is also going to have to live on after we leave, education, because we will have to do it the whole time, and we will have to do it differently the whole time and adapt to what's happening around us. And I think that's one of the skills and the sort of the questions that education has to ask itself. How do we move from this kind of knowing the knowledge to actually having the aptitude to question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when we, the ritual that I have to close is,
Okay.
what question, are you hoping that we still ask about education or AI or reality decades ahead?
Good one.
And
that's quite a good one.
would it be the noise or turning it down, or is there something else that's
No, I
surfaced
think
for
it's probably a bit more than that, because the noise is only one aspect of it. It's kind of like, how am I as a human being in a society that is being influenced hugely by technology, and at times maybe even driven by technology?
Yes.
How do I, as a human, ensure that I remain a social human that can engage with other humans, whilst we also may have to engage and will have to engage with the machine? But how am I part of that kind of collective human intelligence that's much bigger than the word sort of tells us? It's empathy, love, imagination. We never talk about imagination. AI has got no imagination. So, how all these things that do certainly still now differentiate us from the machine, how do we galvanize that as a collective, I think, for me, is a big question. And how do we make the world a better and a safer place with AI and without it?
Yeah. Oh, completely. I'm really grateful for this time with you, Carla.
I've had a lovely time. I enjoyed it hugely, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to engage with you and people at ASU. I hope they will enjoy it.